What's up there guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm Rick, this is Fanfare for the Conscious, and in the video today I'm going to be talking about sovereignty, natural law and how we can use that to build a system of governance by lawful gathering. Let's dive in. So we're going to kick this one off by discussing the basics of governance by lawful gathering. And the main features and the main themes I'm going to be exploring today are going to be the voice of the people, which is divided into national and international jurisdictions and the individual and collective selves. The second thing I'm going to be covering is the idea of physical and intellectual bodies as defined as land bodies and body politics. The last thing I'm going to go over is something that I've decided to call the Fractal Sovereignty system. And this is built on the ideas of natural law and modelled on the structure of the universe itself. The idea of a fractal system of sovereignty is that all the information about the whole, the entire structure, is contained within each part, and this ties back to the idea of a holographic system whereby no matter how small you divide up those elements, the information which allows you to then recreate the whole system is contained within each part. And this is where the natural law starts to tie into it, and the thing that we'll just start to discuss at the end. So what is the voice of the people? And I've talked about the voice of the people in numerous videos in the past. And the voice of the people is the collective will of the gathered. So who are the gathered? Well, the gathered are the people whom have decided that it is their responsibility to discuss and come to conclusions about the collective management of resources. So now we come into the ideas of the national and international jurisdictions and the individual and the collective self. So the individual self is involved with national and internal jurisdictions. Myself as an individual, I am involved in my own management of my own nation, the boundaries of my being as a single individual entity. But by the same token, I could also be considered to be a collective self. I am a collection of individual cells which are trading between themselves outside of their own borders, which forms a form of international and external jurisdiction. Each cell is involved in interacting with other cells, and because that interaction is occurring outside of their own borders, within still the borders of my physical being, that on one level is also an international and external self. All of my cells individually working together as a collective form the entire individual self, which is me. So now we're coming on to the ideas of physical and intellectual bodies, or land bodies, versus body politics. So your physical body is your land or your matter. Again, in my sort of individual sense, I can be considered as a whole. Yes, there are physical boundaries to my matter, beyond which is other. Okay? So this forms what you call the physical bodies, the boundaries. You could consider it again in a county, whereby that county has borders to its land. And it is only management responsible as an individual for the, or a collection of individuals, if we're considering the cells within my body, responsible for that individual piece of land, Then we have the intellectual body, which is the body politic or the mind. So the thing which actually governs this physical land mass, myself or the country or the nation or the planet, is the intellectual component. Okay? And when you decide what things you are willing to be allowed to affect your borders, anything within your borders, you go through a process of thought. And what is thought? Well, thought is nothing more really than a conversation with oneself. You can imagine it like a debate in your head. If you're having to think about something, then there must be more than one obvious option, and that involves a process of debate within yourself where multiple viewpoints are gathered together and pros and cons are argued from each of them. So that forms the body politic. The body politic is my mind, and the physical body is my actual body. The mind cannot consider to be an independent entity. It only exists in this physical incarnation as being part of this physical body. So again, from the top, just to cover all of these points, because it does get quite complicated, and you have to understand that there are overlapping layers, where if you imagine a Venn diagram where on one level you are operating as an individual, but on another level you can be considered to be operating as a collective, and they are not mutually exclusive. They can exist at the same time. So the voice of the people is the collective will of the gathered. The gathered form individual selves on themselves, but when brought together, they become a collective self. Each one of my cells is individually able to exist, but only comes into its wholeness when it is gathered with other living cells. The same with the collective self and the individual self. Individual selves are responsible only for their national boundaries, for their internal politic. Collective selves are responsible for international politic or external matters. The physical body itself is the definable boundaries within which that intellectual body, the body politic, or the mind operates. So we're going to talk a little bit about the fractal sovereignty system now, and this is what eventually is going to replace the current system of governance, the current system of organisation. You might consider it. If you don't like the word government, we can use organisation. That's absolutely fine. We're not talking about control of mind. We're talking about a meeting of minds. And it is built on natural law and modelled on the base structure of the universe. And how do we know that? Well, it can be applied intellectually at multiple different levels. The exact same pattern, the exact same system. And this is the nature of fractals. It is a repeating pattern which you can be zoom into infinitely and zoom out of infinitely. There's some beautiful animations out there on the internet, and I'll see if I can just stick one up now on the board so you've got a little bit of an idea of what it is that I'm talking about. But it is this ability to zoom in forever and see the same repeating patterns going over and over again. And this is one of the most fundamental things about the way that reality itself is structured, is that fractal holographic nature, whereby if you understand one part and you understand the exact pattern that produces that given magnification, that given component, then you can understand all the greater and lower layers. Check out my videos on left brain spirituality for more on that. So we've got all the information about the whole there being contained within each part, and this is what gives it the fractal and holographic nature. And I'm just going to walk you through an idea now to give you an understanding and a cognition of exactly why this is in line with natural law, and to hopefully give you a little bit more trust in how this system may work. So let's consider again the idea of the single body, my body. Each cell within my body may be considered as sovereign within its membrane. We could take a cell out of my body and place it in a nutrient solution. That cell would exist quite happily within that nutrient solution as long as it had all of its requirements for life. However, all cells are different and all cells are differentiated to do specific jobs by their genetics and by their position in the body and by the surroundings in which they have been a part of. And a skin cell can only be a skin cell, really, and only fulfill its role as a skin cell if it is forming the outer layer of a more complex organism. A muscle cell can only function as a muscle cell if it is attached to bones, which have joints, in order to allow it to move and to enact its will upon the world. Nervous system, nervous cells, they can only fulfill their job of communication if there are other things with which to communicate. And this is the basic unit that we need to consider. All of these cells can only fully actualize themselves and only fulfill their role and their calling in life if they are operating as part of a greater body. They are a body within themselves, but they are operating within a greater body. The greater body contains all the resources which are required to serve its selves, and those resources are managed collectively. There are plenty of resources within my body which are not contained within an individual cell, but move between them in the intracellular spaces in the bloodstream, within the stomach and the other digestive organs, the air within the lungs, again, not contained within any individual cell, but contained within the collective body as a whole. And those resources are required by every single cell. And it is only when all of those cells in my body are operating in harmony together that every single one of those cells can have the most fulfilling existence in terms of its true function. The mind of the body has ultimate authority over the collective self via thought. And this comes back to the idea of gathering, of convention, of assembly, of discussion, of debate, and of compromise. The mind itself is the thing that governs exactly what happens in the body. The mind chooses the resources to expend energy on acquiring. The mind determines what is best for all of those cells within the body, and it is not a dictatorship. The mind serves as a function of the requirements of the body and is there to allow that body to thrive and to flourish as best it possibly can. You can see the model right here of sovereignty for you, right before you. If you consider the way your own body works and the way your own body manages itself and the way the disparate and opposing functions of different cells and different systems work to bring a balance to your being, that is all managed by the mind. And the mind and thought is an internal discussion, a debate of viewpoints held by the collective mind. Thank you very much for watching, guys, if indeed you still are. If you did like this content, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up and the notification bell set to all. Make sure you will always be kept up to date when my videos drop on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays at 8 PM UK time. If you want to be part of the Governance by Lawful gathering, please head over to lawfulbank.com, get yourself signed up and have an explore of the site. It's incredibly powerful. There are numerous local hubs and branch networks where you can start to communicate with your own members of your intellectual bodies and the people existing on your physical land bodies. Take care of yourselves, guys. Don't forget to stay free, think free and act free. And as always, I'll see you all next time.